Right, hi there, people. This has gone on to be part three in a row in flow with myself and Dan, and we've decided that in this video, the topic we're going to explore is Dan's interest in magic and mysticism, because he mentioned some of that on his website, and I thought, oh wow, that sounds like a fascinating, juicy conversation and topic to explore. So yeah, what was your entry point to this kind of interest that you have?
I was I was always interested in this kind of thing. Just from a child, just like with Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and ghosts and all that I was talking about before.
Hmm.
Probably a result of being born with a very heavy Scorpio influence in my chart.
Okay, interesting. Uh-huh.
Um, always interested in magical things, magic or whatever, wanted to know what it was as a child, how it worked. And in a similar vein, I was always interested in religion and ideas. I grew up Catholic because when you're a child, if your parents are Catholic, you're Catholic, But
Okay.
but I when I was old enough, I just didn't go, and but I'm just not. I wasn't interested in the dogma of particular religions and institutions, but I like the idea of these grand things. Where we come from, and what is life all about, and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it ties in with magic and everything else. So. I was just always interested in it. Um, and it just, it was a long time before I started really studying it. I was, really, well out of high school. And it's years, you're just reading books, and then when the internet, came along, listening to interviews and gives you access to more things to read about, to learn about these things. But I've always felt it interesting, I did consider going into the priesthood when I was younger,
Wow.
um, but it just didn't feel, there was an attraction, but it just didn't feel right. I looked at the Catholic seminary, I looked at Orthodox seminaries, and things like that. There was interest there, but it just, in this kind of thing, but it just it wasn't, that wasn't the path for this interest. So I didn't pursue it, and I don't regret it, but in a lot of ways, the kind of things that led me to radionics were along this path because I learned about biodynamic agriculture, before about radionics. And Rudolf Steiner is, of course, a big time Christian mystic.
Mm. Yeah.
And um, I did, just, I spent, a lot of time in the martial art world. And there's a big overlap with, part of the martial art world and spirituality and magic and mysticism and things like
Yeah.
that. So you talk to different people and get different ideas, and that's where I started to get exposed more to, some Eastern ideas, Hinduism and Buddhism and things like that. And also Eastern ideas about magic, I mean, it's a worldwide thing, just there's just a different face on it depending on what part of the world you're in.
Hmm.
But but there is a lot of overlap, there's a lot of common ground in these subjects.
Mm.
And it just it just seemed to coalesce, and then when I got into radionics, it was just one more thing, that's part of, all of this stuff that's not, it's it's just part of the, I found this, I mean, I understand why certain people get fascinated by science and things like that. I was more fascinated by this kind of thing, even if I wasn't, I'm not against science or anything like that. And I think you have to have both kinds of minds. You have to have the logical linear mind, and you have to have the non-linear mind. You have to have both. You maybe need to lean on one or the other sometimes, but
Okay.
you shouldn't exclude one. You
Hmm.
know, you you should have both of them,
Yeah.
you should be able to look at the world both ways. And So yeah, it's just always been on my mind. It's always something from when I was young. So that's something I read about more and studied more and practiced and things like that and talked to people, and it just to see where it would go, it was just interesting to me.
Mhm.
So
And it sounds like you've a bit. I think the way that you're talking and seeing how some of the elements are in different cultures or Eastern philosophies, or that frequently there's a lot of different ways of talking about the same things,
oh yeah.
but with different language.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating once you can start to join the dots that actually they're effectively
Oh,
at the core of it all talking about the same kind of things.
they are, and and some people kind of want to look at it as if they're very different and antithetical, but they're really not. They are talking about the same kinds of things.
Mm.
If you want to talk about alchemy, you can alchemy exists, in the East, it exists in the West, and if you study it, they are talking about the same thing. They go about it slightly differently, but at the end of the day, they're looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
No, it's just, it's the blind man and the elephant, it's just everybody's looking at the same thing, they're just looking at a different part of it.
Mm. There's some interesting interviews on the channel with somebody who wrote a book about alchemy, who's a quantum physicist as well, with a fascinating
Hmm.
interview, which I think you'd really enjoy. But I think, is there key books or key texts that were kind of light bulb moments for you on your journey, that you were like, oh yes, this really resonated and landed with you, or?
There were things like the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which is not very long, you know. It's a very short thing.
Yeah,
You know, it's just most of it is just different translations of the same
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
A lot of like some Plato's work. Um, there were things like that. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library. I knew instinctively, long ago that there was some value there, and I got a hold of these things and I was reading them, and I didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't ready yet to really understand what was going on there to
okay,
see. So eventually I got tired and just stuck them with all of my other books and everything like that. But more later on in life, I revisited them after having a lot of different experiences. And then I realized, okay, I understood that there was value to them, but I wasn't ready yet. But now I can start to see them, so
okay.
I start to read things like this. And it makes more sense, and I get into other things, like, Neoplatonism and things like that, which are, it's related to Hermeticism and all of that. I'm more familiar with some of like these more Western ideas, but I do have, and I've studied ideas from the East as well. I've got, copies of the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and um, I'm drawing a blank on some of the other names. I got so many books right now, but I have a lot of books. The Book of Five Rings, Musashi and what was it, Lao Tzu, The Art of War, Sun Tzu. There's a lot of stuff like that, with different ideas, and you'd be surprised how related these things are,
Uh,
and when you're talking about, your spiritual development, and who and what we are and where we can go.
and what was it? I was trying to think. There was sort of, how do you feel that some of the journey you've gone on, how this all feeds back into your day to day daily life, or your kind of, would you say, as you've spiritually developed over the years, you now are in life in a different way because of like how you've developed through this kind of interest that you have?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, like I don't remember who said it, or the word the saying comes from. I think it's from the East. when I was young, something about like I was young, I chopped wood and carried water, and then you learn and went on this journey, and then you come back to your life and you chop wood and you carry water.
Okay.
It's you still have to come back to the and live your life, but these kinds of things are a study that gives you a different perspective, on how you look at yourself and other people and what goes on in the world and how who you are and how you should be and things like that. And that's really what that's really what these things are about. Like I said earlier, we were talking about radionics and magic.
Mm.
When people think of magic, the first thing they think of is, using it to manipulate reality. And you can, but the primary function of the study of magic really is self-development. That's really what it is. That's really what um, the Western magical high magic lodges, that's really where they come from. It's
Mm.
a self-development. It's pursuing a higher development.
Yeah.
It's like that's what it really was. And these other things are a secondary thing, just like the tarot cards. People think of it as a divination, and you can do that, of course, with it. But that's those cards. The major arcana is a map.
Ah,
That's a map of development. You start out as the fool on the fool's journey, and you don't really know where you're going, and you don't know where it's going to end up, but you know you're going on this journey. And then you have these other things. Cards represent these other things in life and in ourselves as you go along this journey. And then once you reach the world, then it goes back again, right back to the fool, really, in a
okay.
cycle. It's like if you look at the tree of life in the Kabbalah, you go from the top, was it Kether at the top, all the way down into Malkuth in the world, and it starts again. The cycle starts again. You keep going in the same way.
Okay.
This is that's what these things are. They're self-development.
Do you think
Or
in some ways you're partly describing almost like a torus field as well? That like
could be, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
because that's a cycle. It keeps going.
yeah, sure, yeah,
And everything, in nature, the world is a tendency to be cyclical, is
yeah.
not static,
Mm-hmm.
so and then you're getting into the Hermetic principle, that which is above is like that which is below,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
accomplish
yeah,
the one thing,
yeah.
it's
The word self mastery was coming in when you were talking about some of this about like understanding internal dialogues and
yeah,
and getting the more spiritual development you're doing, accessing higher levels of thought and communication and consciousness, which then
right,
do you notice things like speaking differently or thinking differently on your journey?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a very different person,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think differently, and I look at things differently, and I react to things differently, and and I feel fortunate to have come across this because, I know people in my life, people that are older than me, that are still pretty much behaving like they were in high school. They're not really that different. They're
Right.
just, they have more money. They're
Sure.
just,
And what would be your human perspective on why do you think that happens for certain humans? What would you, and it could be complicated, but it is curious when sometimes people are so determined to just stay in a particular groove and not do anything different. It is a curious thing if that's not what you're doing, but
I, I think, I think we choose the circumstances of our birth for a lesson, whatever lesson or lessons we need at this time in our development. Now, you still have to do the work when you get here, and I think some people may get stuck in the process
right,
trying to, you know, and I think a lot of, you get at your life has adversity or challenges because you decided you needed that.
right.
And maybe some people don't, they can't quite, they don't quite get through it as much as they had hoped,
Mm,
and also maybe some people, being in that realm where they're not really pushing it, maybe there's something about that struggle where they are that is the value they need,
right, okay.
like the Idris Shah, the great Sufi teacher, he used to say things like, you don't know what another soul is here for. You don't know what they're doing here. You really don't know. Just
Uh-huh.
just because somebody appears to be, some struggling, you know, and some kind of unfortunate person. That doesn't mean they're not right where they need to be necessarily, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah, it's an interesting philosophical perspective, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so with
And you know, a lot of these, there's a lot of like things that aren't really what people think they are. You know, the martial art world, that crossover is there because where it, you know, a long time ago, where those things come from, that was a path of development. You're learning a practical skill that
yeah.
in that world was valuable because it was a violent world.
Hmm.
But the purpose of it was using it as a vehicle of self-development. That's where a lot, you know, much of that came from. Not just in the Orient. You know, there's martial arts in other parts of the world too.
Hmm.
So it was a path of development. This is their vehicle for encountering these things in life and growing and learning. You know, the way of the sword, like in the Orient, it's really isn't any different than um like the tea ceremony or the people who study calligraphy. That's a path of development.
Yeah.
They're studying that, you know, as a vehicle to try to get to something higher, you know.
Hmm.
And even in the West, you know, used to have things like that. That's what all the guilds used to be. The stonemasons guild and all these other guilds, you know,
Okay.
those were secret societies. Those were paths of development. You learn these things, you know, that's been lost. You know, a lot of this stuff is lost in the West, you know, but that's where they come from. You know, that kind of idea that was there, you know.
And do you think, in lots of ways, that's potentially with modern technology and modern society something that's uh, at risk of being energetically lost from the world?
I don't know if it can be completely lost, but it can certainly be overshadowed.
Okay.
Um, I think there'll always be something kind of hanging around waiting for people to pay attention to it. But I think it certainly could get, you know, diverted.
I mean, it's an interesting sort of energetic consideration, isn't it? Particularly when you've got a younger generation potentially significantly addicted to mobile phones
Hmm.
and having relationships with those, and so um, wrapped up by that, that I do wonder whether a new generation might look out for possibilities, because some of what you're talking about is about the study and about self-discipline and an interest. But if you've got people with really short attention spans with technology, they may, a bit like you were describing in the earlier interview with uses of AI, people may not flex the energetic muscle of study and development. And so some of those kind of aspects of society could get lost with this quick fix. I'll just believe whatever I read in the first page of an internet
Yeah.
browser. Yeah.
Yep. And, Rudolf Steiner, I don't know how familiar you are with Steiner, but
Fair.
he, 100 years ago, he foresaw people walking around with boxes in their hand that they would put their whole life into.
Right.
You know, I've got a later someone else who studied his work and other, anthroposophy. They wrote a book called the Electronic Doppelganger
Okay.
about the idea, and this technology is what Steiner would describe as eremonic. It's an eremonic influence.
Right.
This and Steiner viewed this coming of this technology thing as it's not something that can be avoided, and nor should it be.
Okay.
It's something that people need to decide. Are you going to use this technology, this device in your hand as a tool, or are you going to be enslaved by it?
Yeah, sure.
And if it's the first thing you see when you wake up in the morning and the last thing you see when you go to bed last night, and it's your go-to for everything and you
Yeah.
can't be without it, guess what? You're the slave, you
Mm,
know.
yeah. It's
And it, and it's no different than other tech. I mean, it's very similar to what artificial intelligence is. It's a tool. How are you going to use it, or are you going to let it use you? You
yeah.
know.
yeah. I mean,
So there's,
you've cut right to the chase there about the key kind of considerations of yeah, what might you be giving away in terms of energy or thinking, but also
Mhm.
if you think that quite a lot of cloud technologies record all your questions, it may well be that all your questioning thinking is being recorded in a database about every single thing that you've said to this black box.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think it is an interesting time being a human when there is all this rich history and tapestry that people have been exploring for eons in ancient cultures and ancient practices. And yeah, I'm intrigued. I've got two young adult children who are like 27, 21, but yeah, I do worry about the younger generation who are seeing parents addicted to mobile phones. And so, what's the child then going to think? Is this acceptable way to grow
Mhm.
up? Um, so, on a people world level, that kind of worries me a bit, really. But I'm hopeful that actually there'll also be a new set of humans that might reject this because they're not getting what they need from their parents who are on these mobile phones. Uh,
Right.
yeah. So that. Well, how do you
You
think
think,
those things could
you
go?
think about it, it's funny because you have this phone which has access to unparalleled information. When I was young and growing up, we didn't have the
Mm,
internet, we didn't have cell phones. So if you wanted to get a hold of some information, you
mm.
had to go to a library or a bookstore or something like that. You
Yeah,
had to get down and get it and read it.
yeah.
Now, tons of this stuff is has been digitized and it's on the internet and you can have access to it. So if you can keep yourself from being enslaved by this technology, it gives you access to all sorts of information.
Mm-hmm.
So think, I mean, like all these different, there's like all these ancient texts from all these different wisdom and philosophy traditions from around the world. Almost all of that's been scanned into or copied digitally, and you can have access to it on the computer right now.
Mm. Yeah,
You know,
it's pretty fascinating the possibilities. I
you still
suppose.
have to navigate it and do something appropriate
Yeah,
with it,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but you have it right there at your
yeah,
fingertips. It's a
yeah, yeah.
possibility, whereas with far less effort than you would have had to go to get a
Yeah.
hold of it when I was growing up.
But it's to me, it's quite interesting how many humans are interested in that kind of data, or how many are interested in what they're posting on social media, or it's a curious little thing, really, when you've got all these possibilities. What would you do with all the choices, so to speak, or
Right.
will you just want to go to Amazon or all these market leaders in particular areas, or will you be interested in different possibilities? And uh, or will you be interested in reading an ancient book if you feel that you can ask AI for a quick summary about what that ancient book said, and not you might not have the analysis that you've had with your interactions, so you,
Right.
you could get a new generation going to yeah, just tell me what that book says, which um, slightly flabbergasts me. But what would you make of that? Do you think sometimes whole books need to be read and you need to put the work in, or do you think sometimes it's okay to? Hmm,
I think sometimes it's okay, but there is a value to actually reading the book. And honestly, it's a different experience to hold it in your hand and read it than it is to read it on a
oh,
screen.
sure, yeah,
It will
yeah,
affect your mind differently. Your brain works differently if you're actually holding it and reading it than it is if you're just looking at it on a screen.
yeah. I think you're right.
And you but it's like everything else. You have to decide what are you going to do and how are you going to be in the face of whatever this is.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to live consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's very easy to just say Chat GPT tell you what, it's very convenient. It makes it very fast, but you don't really get the value out of it.
Mm.
Um, and that's, I think, is the value of studying these old ideas,
Yeah.
these passive development, these magical, mystical things, because it grounds you and it keeps you more in the realm of what a human being should be, and you don't get lost in what Steiner would call this Ahrimanic realm, of
Right.
this technology, because Ahriman wants to, he wanted to keep man on a downward spiral of evolution and not come back up. And that failed. So now he wants to push everybody ahead too fast, ahead of schedule.
Okay.
You know, so you need to slow yourself down and look at these things, and like I was just at a meditation retreat, at in a a month or two ago in upstate New York, studying, these ideas via a sword, studying ideas of the sword, but as
Mhm.
a vehicle for this. And it was in this beautiful place in upstate New York, and it's in this nature, and everything was quiet, and you're not, no idea what's going on with the news, and the rooms there, when you stay there, they don't have a TV, they don't have an alarm clock, they have outlets you could plug some stuff into, but they don't have anything like that. They have a bathroom.
Mhm.
And because they encourage you to disconnect from that. They encourage you, there's signs around there while you're walking around, encouraging you to turn your phone off and just leave that alone and just be quiet and don't disturb others' peace. And
Mhm.
it changes you. Even there being there for 3 or 4 days, it changes you. So I think that's, things like that are good. Getting out into your garden or your yard or just taking a walk is better than, doom scrolling on Facebook or TikTok.
Mhm. For sure.
Not that, now, granted, there's, like I said, there's value, there is information you could get on these things, but are you compelled to just be there all the time, or can you just go there, get the information you need, and then shut it down and go outside and touch grass,
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose that's going to be the interesting generational thing is
Mhm.
how a new generation will potentially make those decisions. Will they make those decisions? How will they find balance or a place in their life? And where does the art of being human in their real life kind of it's going to be an interesting sort of psychological test, I think, in the next 5, 10 years. I think particularly when you've got
Yeah.
a new generation that have been brought up seeing mum and dad on mobile phones, want to get mobile phones straight away, and I think that's going to be like a really big, fascinating, energetic thing.
Well, this youngest generation has already grown up that way.
Yeah,
And, but it's interesting because I'm I'm hearing things that some of those people from that generation, they're starting to go back. They want a flip phone. They don't want a smartphone.
right. Interesting. Yeah,
There's interest in analog photography again.
yeah, yeah.
People
That,
who are looking at reel-to-reel tape machines instead of digital sound. People
right.
are,
Yeah.
because there are subtle differences. It's not the
Hmm.
same thing. So at least some people are starting to think about it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe not quite go so far into some of this stuff. And again, I think it's probably because, like I say, I believe we choose the circumstances of our birth, but I'm old enough to remember the analog world.
Yeah.
I was, I was in my 20s by the time we had the internet, you
Okay.
know. So I didn't grow up with that attraction. I sometimes I think what it would be like if you grew up and all the internet was already here, and
Yeah.
cell phones were already there. That's just what you see. That's what you have. That's just when you're young and impressionable. That's just how it works. So, but again, I think that's why there's value in studying these old ideas. And
Yeah.
I don't think there's one path is the correct one or one religion or whatever
Okay.
like that. I think there's truth in all of them, but it's valuable to at least examine something like that and try to give yourself a different perspective instead of just living in the digital technological world constantly. It's
Yeah.
just,
And
I think
it's fascinating what you were saying about the what goes on in the brain when you're actually reading a physical book.
Mhm.
I'm an author as well, and I love buying secondhand books. And I think there's just something magical about the energy of the design of a physical book, the effort, the packaging, and to my mind, you're kind of holding somebody's blood, sweat, and tears of that whole crystallization process that they put in.
right.
And I think,
In a bookstore, I miss, I
okay,
like bookstores.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
we've got, yeah, a few bookstores where I live or close by, and I think it's fascinating. But I think there's just it is fascinating what you're saying about, yeah, thinking about what happens at a brain level.
Mhm.
Um,
It's
and
just like the same thing. If you're in nature, you're affecting your energy system and your brain works differently.
yeah,
If you're, if you're meditating, if you're reading these ideas, if you're practicing,
mm,
some sort of a path, for self-development, whether it's, the sword or a tea ceremony or
yeah,
some kind of magical thing or alchemy, that that changes you the same way, you're internally, your brain and your other parts of you, that's different than
mm,
if you're just living in the modern world.
mm. And you mentioned anecdotally earlier that it's almost like once you flex a muscle, the muscle becomes stronger and then you can do more with it and you're more agile. And so I think, yeah, that's to me one of the interesting energetic things about it. The moment you're talking about a mindset or a philosophy about keeping this working and developing it.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, hopefully a younger future generation will start to go, gosh, yeah, this is of critical importance, finding practices, whatever they may be, to keep the mind nimble, agile, refreshed, invigorated, all those kind of dimensions. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, fingers crossed there's a whole new generation of youngsters who are going to be going, yes, that has to be it. Intuitively, they might sense, I always like to think people come into this life with past life experiences as well. So they might intuitively sense that there's something not right or energetically there for them within some of these practices that happen with the modern technologies. I'd like to think that there's some truth to that. I don't know what you think about that perspective or.
Well, I think I'm hoping, and I think maybe that this young generation is already starting to look at this, and hopefully, and that would be nice because it's sooner. Because a lot of times societal, events occur, and it takes a long time for society to realize, oh, we made a mistake. We need to go back to something else or change things.
Okay, right.
Hopefully, if these young people are doing this already, that's a pretty short turnaround. So hopefully, hopefully we can they can learn that and we can change this before society has to go to some stupid extent way over here and they realize,
Yeah.
oh, we shouldn't have done this. Hopefully that it changes sooner, and it looks like it might be. So
Yeah, that's exciting to think about because I think there's lots of different generations that can influence it as well, can't you? You've got the elders in communities as much as you've got the teenagers, and it's an interesting interplay of influence perhaps as well.
yeah.
Yeah, and so with the magic and mysticism, is there a particular um, is it a constant search? Is it just a state of mind for you that you're always kind of like a bit of a magpie looking for new interesting things that might kind of add in extra dimensions?
um I don't necessarily always looking for new things, but I do come across them,
Okay,
because I don't want to get lost in the search for new things all the time, so I'm never focusing on something.
right, okay,
But yeah, there's I just, as I'm reading something, this book, it'll make a mention of something else, and oh, okay, maybe I should look into that.
okay,
So I don't really need to go looking for them. It's just sort of finds you, you
yeah.
know, but
And,
in my experience.
and do you think that comes down to vibrationally? I always like to think that as human beings, we send vibrations out, and once we send
Yeah.
a frequency or a message out,
Yep.
the cosmos will send people to us or life situations to us that are
Yes.
attracted to that frequency. Is that how you would perceive it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great.
Yep. Exactly. And you'll see it in magic, you see it in radionics. If you are fearful about something and worry about something and fret about something, you're going to manifest it in your life,
Hmm.
and you'll see it.
Yeah.
You see it in people around you, and if so, you want to, you know, send out, be conscious, be present, but, so you're sending out a different kind of energy so the universe responds differently. and
Absolutely.
gives you the kinds of things,
Yeah,
that you're looking for and you want or need.
yeah, yeah.
You have to be, and again, you have to be conscious about it. You can't just kind of skate through it or sleep through it, because the universe will respond
Yeah, yeah.
you're doing, but it will respond on its terms and its schedule. It
Uh,
won't necessarily respond in what you expect it to be. So you have to be on kind of aware for something that may come through your life, and that may be something you want and need. But if you're expecting it to be something like this, something different, they just go right on by and you'll miss it.
right.
You
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. And fascinating. Really. There's a book here that I've just done a little video on called "The Power of Your Subconscious Mind" by Joseph Murphy. If you haven't read that, I think you would really like that. Loads of fascinating uh, recollections of fascinating things that have happened when people effectively pray and use and broadcast that from their subconscious mind. And yeah, you can listen to that on audiobook on YouTube and stuff. It's a great book.
Yeah, the subconscious is powerful.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, uh, Johann Goethe, the great polymath and poet, he said that if you dedicate yourself, if you earnestly undertake a task or an effort, the universe will conspire to aid you, to give you what you need.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful.
So you can take advantage of that, instead of, and by doing these things, you can live your life consciously, and you can have some control, because so many people feel like they're just in a river being taken wherever, and they are in a way, because you're not really taking control of your life. You don't have any understanding or faith in what a human being really is. And
Yeah,
you think that's just how life is. It doesn't have to be that way. You can have some measure of control in your life.
yeah,
And that's what that's a big thing about what all these paths of development, these magical studies or these religions, where they really come from, not what they've kind of turned into in the modern world, but where they come from. That you know, you can have this conscious, existence, this presence. Life doesn't have to just be an experience where it just buffers you and beats you, and then
yeah, yeah.
it doesn't have to be like that.
And
It
that's a
doesn't mean there won't be challenges, but
for
you
sure.
know, but it doesn't have to be like what people, experience sometimes.
And the magic that you're summarizing is that you can do a significant amount to play a part in that process if you take the time to look, study, think, and consider. It's
Right.
quite exciting what you've been summarizing, really, what you've taken from magic and mysticism. I'm aware we got to the end of another interview. It's been super cool to chat to you. Loads of juicy things there that I think people would love to watch, and I hope we can get lots of viewers and people will be interested in looking into some of the topics that we've discussed in the books that we've talked. Thanks very much for sharing your insights. It's been a real pleasure
Thanks
to
for having me.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, you too. Same here.
All right. Cheers, Dan. Lovely to chat to you. Thanks again.